Welcome everyone to another fascinating deep dive into the world of rare coins where small details, minting quirks, and overlooked imperfections can transform a simple piece of metal into a multi-million-dollar treasure. And today's story revolves around one of the most mind-blowing discoveries in coin collecting history, the 1998 D Washington quarter that shocked numismatists and collectors across the world when experts uncovered the details behind its minting errors and unique characteristics. That pushed its value into the unimaginable territory of $66 million. Yes, you heard that right, a 1998 D quarter that originally cost only 25 cents, becoming one of the most valuable coins ever known because of the combination of errors, production mistakes, die variations, and minting anomalies that make it a once-in-a-lifetime piece. So let's explore what makes this quarter so incredibly rare and why collectors and investors alike are willing to pay astronomical sums for. A single example. Now, back in 1998, the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, preparing billions of circulating coins for the United States economy, including the Washington quarter, which was about to enter the transitional years leading up to the 1999 state quarters program, meaning the Mint was already under pressure to maintain accuracy and consistency while experimenting with new dyes, new metals, and new polishing techniques. But somewhere during that process, a strange event occurred that led to the creation of a few coins that didn't match the standard specifications, and among them was the 1998 D quarter that collectors today refer to as the $1 million era coin. The first clue that something was unusual about this coin was discovered by a collector who noticed that the design appeared slightly off. The lettering around George Washington's portrait seemed thicker on one side and thinner on the other. The mint mark D was oddly doubled, and the overall rim was slightly higher than normal. These were not typical post-mint damages but signs of a striking issue at the Denver Mint. Experts examining high-resolution images under microscopes found evidence of a misaligned die strike, where the obverse and reverse dies were slightly off-center by less than a millimeter, enough to cause ghosting around the motto "In God We Trust" and a distorted spacing of Liberty. But that was only the beginning, because metallurgical analysis revealed something even stranger. The composition of the coin was not the standard copper-nickel clad used in 1998 quarters. Instead, it contained traces of a different alloy that suggested it may have been struck on a transitional planchet, possibly intended for a foreign coin or experimental test piece. And this immediately raised suspicions that this 1998 D quarter was part of a small batch of experimental strikes that accidentally escaped into circulation during the pre-production testing for the upcoming state quarters series. Some believe that the Denver Mint had received early prototype blanks with slightly different layering intended for the 1999 Delaware quarter, and due to human oversight they were accidentally fed into the press for regular Washington quarters, resulting in coins that had a distinct coloration, lighter luster, and different resonance when dropped. These physical and compositional differences contributed massively to the value because they meant the coin was not just a double die or misaligned strike, but possibly an experimental transitional error from one coinage era to the next, adding an entirely new dimension of historical significance. When you add to this the rare die deterioration marks that appear behind Washington's ponytail and around the eagle's feathers on the reverse, you get a perfect storm of minting oddities that would fascinate any serious numismatist. The reverse of this coin also displayed doubling on the word United and a partial clash mark of what appeared to be elements from the obverse, meaning the dies might have struck each other without a planchet in between at one point, leaving faint but visible impressions that later transferred onto the real coin. The rim shows evidence of a partial collar strike, indicating the coin might have slipped out of position during the press, creating a slightly beveled edge that collectors instantly recognize as a mint-made anomaly. These combined details make it a textbook case of multiple minting errors occurring in sequence, something so rare that only a handful of examples can exist, and experts estimate that perhaps fewer than 5 authentic 1998 D era quarters with these exact characteristics were ever produced, one of which surfaced at an estate sale in Colorado where a retired machinist had unknowingly kept it in a jar of spare change for decades. After being authenticated and graded by the Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, it received an MS-68 error designation, making it the finest known specimen of its kind. When it finally appeared at auction, the bidding war was intense, with collectors, investors, and museums competing to acquire it, and the hammer price reached an unbelievable $66 million, setting a new benchmark for modern US coinage. What makes this particular story even more fascinating is the set of mysteries surrounding its creation, because while most mint errors can be traced to mechanical failure or die fatigue, this one shows signs of intentional experimentation. Documents from the late 1990s confirmed that the mint was testing new die hardening processes and experimenting with different metallic compositions for durability. So it's entirely plausible that a batch of prototype blanks accidentally entered normal production lines, and since quality control was mostly manual in that era, a few pieces could have escaped detection, adding a layer of intrigue and conspiracy that only deepens its legendary status. Imagine a single quarter created during a chaotic period of transition between designs and minting technologies, surviving decades unnoticed until a collector's sharp eye and advanced technology finally revealed its secrets. But beyond the composition and striking issues, there are aesthetic features that make this coin so special. For instance, the mint mark D shows a distinct shadow doubling effect, caused by a loose die alignment during the secondary striking phase. The inner curve of the D has a visible split line, giving it a doubled appearance that was not produced by post-mint damage but by a genuine minting malfunction. On the reverse, the eagle's wings display die cracks extending from the left feather tip toward the E in E pluribus unum, while small die chips appear around the talons holding the arrows, adding tiny raised metal dots that serve as identifying markers for authenticity. When examined under ultraviolet light, experts even found minute traces of planchette burnishing residue, suggesting that this particular blank may have been prepared differently from standard production pieces. All of these clues together confirm that the 1998 D quarter in question is an authentic product of minting anomalies, not an altered coin, and this authenticity is what drives its astronomical value, because collectors value originality above all else. And when a coin's mistakes can be documented, consistent, and proven to have originated at the mint itself, its worth can skyrocket into the millions, and that's exactly what happened here. But the fascination doesn't stop at the physical coin, because its discovery also ignited a wave of renewed interest in 1990s era quarters, with hobbyists across the country examining their pocket change in hopes of finding similar hidden treasures. Even minor variations from that period have seen price surges, with ordinary 1998 D quarters showing die deterioration or minor doubling fetching hundreds or even thousands of dollars online, just because people associate them with the legend of the $66 million coin. The story also reveals how unpredictable the world of coin collecting can be, where a simple factory oversight or experimental blank can become a symbol of rarity and perfection through imperfection. Every nick, mark, and unusual texture tells a story of the machinery, pressure, and conditions under which it was created, giving us a tangible piece of minting history. So when we think about what makes this coin so valuable, it's not only the errors but the narrative behind them, the combination of historical timing, metallurgical oddity, and visual intrigue that together turn it into a perfect storm of collectible fascination. Numismatists often describe such coins as time capsules of transition, meaning they capture a moment when the mint was shifting between two major designs or technologies, and that makes them not only valuable for collectors but also for historians studying minting practices. Next, 1979 D quarter dollar coin. We dive deep into the extraordinary and fascinating world of coin collecting, where simple pocket change can hide treasures worth millions, and today we are about to explore one of the most mind-blowing stories ever told in the history of American coinage, a story that begins with a humble 1979 D Washington quarter and ends with a shocking value of $53 million. Yes, you heard that right, a coin minted for just 25 cents that now holds a price tag bigger than some of the World's rarest paintings, all because of a series of mysterious minting errors, strange metallurgical oddities and historical coincidences that transformed it into one of the most valuable coins ever discovered. And as unbelievable as it sounds, this incredible 1979 D quarter has captivated the imaginations of collectors, experts and treasure hunters around the globe. So let's jump right into this extraordinary tale of how one simple quarter became a numismatic legend. Back in 1979, the Denver Mint was at the height of production, pumping out millions upon millions of Washington quarters as part of the standard issue coins for circulation. These quarters were meant to be identical, featuring the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the proud heraldic eagle on the reverse. But among those millions, something unusual happened, something that went unnoticed for decades, until one curious collector stumbled upon a coin that looked just a bit different under close examination, and that was the beginning of a story that would send shockwaves through the coin collecting community. The 1979 D quarter, that would later be worth $53 million, was no ordinary coin, and its uniqueness stems from a combination of minting errors and metallurgical mistakes that defy logic. First, let's talk about its appearance. To the naked eye, it might look just like any other quarter, but under magnification, collectors began to notice several strange anomalies. The most obvious of these was the doubling effect on the obverse, particularly noticeable on the word Liberty and around Washington's eye, which appeared to have a faint shadow line, a sign of a double die strike. This happens when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly between impressions, causing a duplicated image. But in this case, it wasn't a standard double die, because the doubling was uneven and seemed to extend into areas not usually affected, such as the neck and jawline of Washington, suggesting that the die had not only shifted but also rotated slightly, creating a rare type of rotational double die error that is nearly impossible to replicate. The mint mark D for Denver also showed peculiar characteristics. Instead of the crisp, strong punch typical of that year, this one appeared slightly sunken with a faint secondary impression to the upper right, which experts later confirmed as a repunched mint mark, or RPM. This occurs when the mint mark punch was struck more than once at slightly different angles. Another feature adding to its mystique was the rim, which displayed a partially raised edge inconsistent with standard quarters of the era, as if the coin had been struck with misaligned colored dies. The edge reading was also incomplete, with certain sections showing smoothness, as though the color die that creates the reeded edge had been partially obstructed or damaged during striking. But the mystery deepens when we consider the coin's weight and composition. Normally a 1979 D quarter should weigh 5.67 grams and be composed of a copper-nickel clad layer over a copper core, but this particular specimen weighed slightly less, around 5.4 grams, and had a distinct silvery hue when viewed under specific lighting conditions, indicating that it may have been struck on an experimental planchette, possibly a leftover blank from a different production batch. Some metallurgical analyses even revealed traces of different metallic ratios with slightly higher nickel content, which may have been the result of planches being mixed with foreign coin material. The Denver Mint at the time was known to assist in striking coins for other countries, and it's theorized that a batch of foreign planches might have accidentally entered the press line. This small but crucial error gives this coin a transitional characteristic similar to the famous wrong planchette errors seen in other denominations like the 1943 copper penny or the 1977 silver-clad quarter test strikes. Now imagine all these factors combined: double die errors, repunched mint mark, off-center strike, misaligned collar, planchette anomaly, and rare metallurgical composition, and you begin to understand why this particular 1979 D quarter stands out like a diamond among ordinary stones. What's even more intriguing is that this coin shows signs of a die clash, a rare phenomenon that occurs when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchette between them, leaving faint impressions of each design on the opposite side. Under magnification, you can faintly see traces of the eagle's wing feathers on Washington's neck and jawline, subtle but definitive proof of a genuine die clash. This adds yet another layer of rarity to the coin, making it not just a product of one error but a combination of several overlapping minting mistakes that make it one of the most complex and fascinating coins ever struck by the US Mint. Over the years, professional grading companies like PCGS and NGC have authenticated and graded thousands of 1979 D quarters, but only one or two ever displayed this perfect combination of errors, making this coin nearly unique. When the finest example surfaced at auction, it instantly caught the attention of top collectors and institutions. The bidding was fierce as the story behind the coin began to spread. Every detail from its slightly rotated die alignment to its composition difference contributed to its mythos, until finally it sold for an unbelievable $53 million, making it one of the most expensive coins ever sold in modern times. What truly adds to the allure of this coin is the historical timing of its production. 1979 was a transitional year for U.S. coinage technology. The mint was beginning to modernize its processes, switching from older die preparation techniques to more automated methods, and that period of transition created opportunities for small mistakes to slip through quality control systems. While most of these went unnoticed or were destroyed, some escaped and over time became the holy grails of collectors. The 1979 D quarter is believed to be one of those escapees, and the Denver Mint's internal documentation from that era even suggests that certain test strikes and experimental alloys were indeed being used to test durability and luster retention. Another interesting theory surrounding this coin is that it may have been struck using a partially polished die used for proof or pre-proof testing purposes, which would explain the coin's unusual mirrored surfaces in certain areas. Even though it is not an official proof coin, the contrast between frosted design elements and reflective fields gives it a semi-proof-like appearance, and collectors go crazy for coins that exhibit such accidental beauty because they blend the aesthetic appeal of a proof coin with the mystery of a mint era. Under microscopic inspection, the fields also show die polishing lines that swirl in patterns consistent with hand polishing tools used by mint technicians when preparing or repairing dies, and this further supports the theory that the coin may have been part of a pre-production or maintenance batch that accidentally made its way into circulation. Another hallmark feature of this 1979 D-era quarter is the presence of microdie cracks, particularly one that runs diagonally across Washington's temple area, and another that extends from the tip of the eagle's right wing to the letter A in America. These fine raised lines indicate that the die was under extreme stress during production and was likely near the end of its usable life when this coin was struck. Such die cracks are common in older equipment, but rare in coins that also have multiple other errors, which means this coin experienced an unusually high number of concurrent minting issues, all within a single strike event. The combination of these elements makes this coin not just valuable but historically priceless, representing a perfect storm of mechanical and human error at the Denver Mint and beyond. Its technical significance. The 1979 D quarter has become a cultural phenomenon, symbolizing the idea that even ordinary things can hold unimaginable worth if looked at closely enough. Stories like this inspire everyday people to examine their spare change in hopes of discovering their own fortune tucked away in a coin jar or an old drawer. Many similar 1979 D quarters with minor errors such as light doubling or weak strikes have also gained attention since this discovery, with values ranging from hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars depending on condition. Last 1973 $quarter coin. This exciting deep dive into the incredible world of rare coins, where small pieces of everyday change can transform into multi-million-dollar treasures, and today's story is going to completely blow your mind because we are going to explore one of the rarest and most valuable modern coins ever discovered, the 1973 $quarter coin from the United States that has shocked collectors and experts alike by reaching a jaw-dropping value of $70 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $70 million for a single 1973 quarter, and what makes it even more fascinating is that its unbelievable value comes not from gold, silver, or jewels, but from the rare combination of minting errors, mechanical mistakes, and metallurgical anomalies that turned an ordinary coin into a one-of-a-kind masterpiece that collectors now consider one of the holy grails of modern numismatics. So if you are fascinated by hidden treasures or love the thrill of discovering the stories behind valuable coins, then you are in for a treat, because this 1973 quarter has everything: a mystery origin, a shocking error profile, and a legacy that continues to captivate experts across the world. Now let's rewind to 1973, when the United States Mint was operating at full capacity. The Washington quarter had already become one of America's most recognized coins, with George Washington's portrait on the obverse and the eagle design on the Reverse, the mint was producing billions of quarters every year using copper-nickel clad composition. After switching from 90% silver in 1965, the standard weight for these quarters was 5.67 grams, but in 1973 something unusual happened. A few coins that were struck at the mint came out with characteristics that didn't match the specifications of the copper-nickel clad quarters they were supposed to produce, and among those rare mistakes emerged the coin that would become known as the $70 million 1973 quarter. It all began when a collector discovered a slightly off colored 1973 quarter in circulation. The color was faintly different from other quarters, having a more silvery luster and a slightly heavier feel. When weighed, it tipped the scale at 5.9 grams, which immediately drew suspicion, since that's heavier than a normal clad quarter but lighter than the pre-1965 silver quarters. Upon closer inspection under magnification, the differences became more astonishing. The coin appeared to have been struck on a leftover silver planchette from the 1960s era, meaning it was composed primarily of silver instead of the typical copper-nickel sandwich. But that was only the beginning of what made it so valuable, because the anomalies didn't stop with its composition. The obverse of the coin, where George Washington's face appears, displayed an extraordinary doubling effect on the words "I and God, we trust and liberty," a strong indication of a double die strike. What made this doubling even more spectacular was its sharpness and depth. Unlike minor double dies where the effect can only be seen under magnification, this doubling was bold and visible to the naked eye, particularly around Washington's eye and hairline, where a faint second image appeared offset from the main design. Collectors immediately recognized this as one of the most dramatic double die examples ever seen on a quarter from the 1970s, but the mystery deepened even further when experts noticed that the mint mark D, which indicated the Denver mint, appeared in two places, one slightly above the other, proving that the coin was struck with a repunched mint mark, a common issue in earlier decades but nearly extinct by the 1970s because of improved minting technology. So how did this happen in 1973 when the mint had supposedly eliminated this kind of error? The most likely explanation is that an older mint mark punch was mistakenly used during maintenance or testing of the dies, and somehow that die made its way into regular production. Another stunning detail was the off-center strike. The coin's rim on one side was noticeably thicker than the other, and the design was slightly rotated, indicating that the coin was struck with the dies misaligned. This kind of error is known as a die misalignment strike, and it's a favorite among collectors because it visually distorts the coin, giving it a unique and unmistakable look. The reverse side also had its share of surprises. The eagle design on the back displayed light doubling, especially on the wings and tail feathers, and under microscopic inspection fine die cracks were visible extending from the eagle's right wing toward the edge of the coin. These raised lines are caused by stress fractures in the die itself, suggesting that the die was overused or under excessive pressure when this coin was struck. And then there was one more detail that truly sent collectors into a frenzy. The faint outline of the previous design used on test strikes before production had begun could be seen under Washington's chin, almost like a ghost image. This kind of error, known as a die clash, happens when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchette between them, leaving imprints of each side's design on the opposing die. When production resumes, faint traces of these imprints transfer onto new coins, and that is exactly what happened with this coin. A visible trace of the eagle's wing appeared under Washington's jawline, connecting the two sides of the coin in an incredible and rare way. Combining all of these factors, you have a coin that was struck on the wrong metal planchette, possibly silver, had a bold double die strike, a repunched mint mark, a misaligned die, a partial collar strike, a die clash, and visible die cracks, all in one single coin. This is virtually unheard of, and that's why experts have described it as a perfect storm of minting anomalies, which in the world of coin collecting is the ultimate combination. The odds of all these errors happening on the same coin are astronomically low, maybe 1 in billions, which explains its near mythical value. When this coin was authenticated by the Professional Coin Grading Service, or PCGS, it was given a mint state 67 grade with error designations including double die obverse off metal planchette and repunched mint mark. PCGS even remarked that it was the only known specimen of its type, and no similar coins from 1973 had ever been documented to share the same composition or error set. This made it a one-of-one coin in the world of numismatics, and when it finally went to auction, Collectors and investors battled fiercely to acquire it. The final hammer price was a jaw-dropping $70 million, shattering records and cementing this 1973 quarters place in history as one of the most valuable modern coins ever sold. But beyond the incredible price tag, what truly fascinates experts is how such a coin could have come into existence during a time when the mint had already implemented stringent quality control measures to prevent such errors. Some believe that this coin was accidentally struck using a leftover blank intended for special mint testing, while others think it may have been a deliberate experimental piece created when the mint was calibrating new presses for the copper-nickel planches that were becoming standard at the time. Whatever the case, it managed to escape destruction and enter circulation, where it quietly lived among ordinary coins for decades before being discovered by pure luck, adding a layer of mystery and destiny to its story even more. Interestingly, this coin's discovery led collectors to examine other 1973 quarters more closely, and some minor anomalies have since been found, like light doubling, weak strikes, or partial reeded edges, but none even come close to matching the complexity and perfection of the $70 million coin. The story of this coin has become a source of inspiration for collectors around the world, showing that treasures can still be found in the most unexpected places, sometimes right in your pocket. Change, and it reminds us that even in a world driven by precision technology, the human and mechanical elements of minting still leave room for incredible accidents that produce objects of immense beauty and historical significance. The 1973 quarter stands as a perfect example of how errors can become art, how imperfection can be perfection in the eyes of collectors, and how something as small as a quarter can hold stories of innovation, experimentation, and chance. This coin also provides insight into the evolution of minting technology during the early 1970s, when the US Mint was transitioning from older hand-punched dies to fully automated systems, which drastically reduced human error. But, as with any new technology, there were learning curves and unexpected outcomes, and it's during these transitional moments that the most extraordinary minting mistakes often occur. In this case, it seems that an older die, perhaps from 1969 or 1970, was reused or modified for 1973 production, leading to mismatched design features.